This is Arina Pismenny in bioethics. It's called Pain, Power, and Policing Emotional Injustice in Healthcare. Come on, computer. There we go. And as always, ask me questions along the way. This is my first time reading it. I'm not endorsing this. We're just trying to figure out what's good about it. And at the end, we get to rate it. And I have a rating system I was showing earlier. So, yeah. You've had a migraine for like a week. Oh, no. Which country's healthcare system? We'll find out. We will find out. I don't know, chocolate. Yeah. So, like the U.S.? Yeah. Well, it may not be unique to the U.S. A lot of the problems in healthcare in general, like, because what are we calling this? Pain, power, and policing, emotional injustice in healthcare. What this might be is that different people discuss their emotions in different ways. And so if you've got doctors who are trained in understanding certain accounts of like emotion and pain in a certain way, they may not understand other accounts of it. And so the people who describe their pain and emotions differently may be at a disadvantage than the people who describe their pain and emotions in the ways that the doctors understand. And we'll see. I don't know. This is just like my first stab guess just on the title, what's going on. But like that makes sense. So not everyone describes pain in the same way. So like when I go to the doctor, I had to go to the hospital. I've lost, I'm like, if I was a cat, I'd be getting worried about my 9 lives. I'm running low. So I was at the hospital one time and they ask about pain levels and they give you a 1 to 10 chart. I say, look, I don't do 1 to 10. I have 3 levels: normal pain, unnormal pain, and death. Okay? Normal pain is just like now. I'm in pain. Like I have normal pain. Then there's unnormal pain. That's like, I have a cut, I broke a bone, whatever. Then there's death. Death is approaching like death. And so I said, look, one time I had to go in there. Like, look, as far as you're concerned, I'm at an 11. Okay? That's my pain level. But you have to put it in terms that they understand. I only have 3 pain levels, but they don't know what those are. But when I say, look, as far as you're concerned, I'm at an 11 right now. And they understand that. Sounds like female hysteria, to be honest. Yeah, exactly. Right says, yeah, clinicians are not therapists. But this is just my first pass guess. This may not be at all what's talking about, but this isn't a crazy thought, I don't think. Like, if it's on this topic, there's definitely things to be discussed here. Follow tends toward in general, I think. Yeah, it might be, though. It may also be on one of the local healthcare systems. But what I just described will be basic to any doctor level training because, as the good right hook says, clinicians are not therapists. They're separate disciplines. So it's just gonna be a normal split. Introduction, and here we go. Healthcare is not just about diagnosing and treating illness, it is also about navigating patients' lived experiences, including their emotions. This is particularly evident in the treatment of chronic pain sufferers, whose reports of distress are often met with skepticism, dismissal, or even outright disbelief. Consider the case of a woman experiencing severe, unexplained pain who is repeatedly told by doctors that she is too anxious or overreacting, while a male patient with similar condition receives immediate serious consideration. Such differential treatment reflects not just biases in medical diagnosis, but a deeper systemic issue, the policing of emotions in healthcare. Yeah, so it does seem like we're in the right area here. It does not seem calibrated with simple sample pains. Yeah. I mean, there's always the classic discussion. How do we actually understand pain? Is my pain similar to your pain? And so, like, what actually counts as a like how do we actually judge whose pain is like actually bad? And this is the problem. You get a lot of biases when like this is just like you get biases. You think certain people aren't in pain when they are based on what they say because it's not what you're expecting. And then you've got old racist things because like here in the US, people used to say that black people don't experience pain the same as white people, and so they would discount the pain reports of black people, and then which is insane. But like it's just racism. Like it's just racism. But well, no, it's more than that too. There's history and there's racism and lots of stuff. But like it's basically racist bullshit. And so like there's a lot going into this. That's all. Like and it is a hard question to explain levels of pain across different cultures and peoples and stuff. And history for that matter. How people describe pain in the past is not how people are going to describe it today. Anywho, continuing. Steve says, when they ask you, just groan really loud, instinct jump in front of the line. I don't know. Steve. I'm in New York. Like, everyone's complaining. I'm not sure if that just does it. I mean, I've said some things that have made nurses move very quickly before, but that was warranted. I don't know if, like, just groaning is what's going to do it, because they've heard all the stories. They've heard everything. There's no, like, if you deal with, like, EMTs or medics around here, they've seen it all. They've heard it all. And, like, believe me, no one slips and falls and have things go up their butt. They say that this is, like, a very common thing, that, like, people are putting shit up their ass, and, like, no one, like, the amount of times they have to retrieve things from people's anus is, like, so ridiculous that they've heard so many stories about people slipping and falling on, like, corn husks. It's like, no, that's not what happened. We don't care that you wanted to put up your ass, but, like, you need to, like, do it better. But, like, this is so common that it's, like, not interesting for them anymore. Gunshot wound gets you to the front line? Yeah, probably. Chocolate says, maybe when they just give you the weak stuff and move on to the stronger stuff, it isn't working. Well, yeah, I mean, why not do the simplest thing first? It's always a decent strategy. O'Neill says, basically everyone in my life has had pain radically discounted, dismissed. Wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't heard as much as I do. Yeah, and this is extremely common. Like, extremely common. I don't react very strongly to, like, I can be in a lot of pain and I stay exactly the same. One time I was getting stitches and the anesthesia didn't take. And I told the doctor, I was just like, yeah, I think the anesthesia missed. And the guy was just like, nah, that's not possible. You'd be in, like, extreme pain. I'm like, I am in extreme pain. And they're like, nah, that's not right. I'm like, yeah, just finish up. And about a minute later, one of the nurses came over and goes like, oh my God, you're turning green. I said, yeah, the anesthesia didn't take. I'm in a lot of pain right now. And I was, like, literally turning green because I was, like, feeling sick with, like, pain. But like, I keep talking like this, and the doctor kind of, like, didn't look at me. He just kept sewing, and the nurse started calling over the other nurses. They're like, oh my God, he's actually turning green. Like, this doesn't normally happen. I'm like, yeah, a lot of pain. Like, it's like, yeah, it's like, I've had people to my face tell me I wasn't feeling pain. I'm like, nah, dude. And that's not actually pain. I was turning into Hulk. Maybe banana. Yeah. Unreal says, another thing that gets you in front of the line is falling on the third rail at Chicago. Well, holy fuck, yeah, that's bad. That happened to somebody the night I was in the ER for something comparatively minor and got left on my own for a long time. That guy died. Yeah, I mean, you're getting shocked with, like, 50,000 volts of electricity. That's a legit, you're going to be dead very soon if they don't, like, save your ass. But yeah, they're not going to save your ass. Okay, so here we go. Emotions play a fundamental role in clinical encounters, shaping how patients communicate suffering and how providers interpret and respond to it. Like other aspects of behavior, emotions are governed by social norms, which dictate when, how, and by whom emotions should be experienced and expressed. Yeah, and this is exactly what we figured it would be. Like, the way I express pain is in the exact same voice I'm doing now. I'm not usually very emotive on these things. I'm like, yeah, I'm in a lot of pain. And I just say it the same tone of voice. And it's easy to discount when you don't see any, like, agony on my face. It's like I have a high pain tolerance. While such norms are essential to social life, they can also function as mechanisms of control, particularly when they systematically disadvantage certain groups in medical settings. Yeah, don't be black and female in America. It's just like the outcomes here for black and female are much, much worse than basically every other demographic. Well, maybe not every other one, but it's much worse than the average. And it's like they are both women and not believed and black and not believed in the United States. And this is just the state of the United States healthcare. Okay, I argue that emotion policing in healthcare constitutes a form of emotional injustice that undermines patient autonomy and exacerbates inequalities in pain treatment. Specifically, I use the concept of emotion policing, a form of unjust emotion regulation that enforces conformity to dominant emotional norms, leading to the suppression, distortion, or dismissal of patients' emotion. Emotion policing is a structural problem within institutionalized power hierarchies in medicine, affecting diagnostic practices, treatment decisions, and patients' access to equitable care. And this is what I was saying before. Like, when you go to the hospital, they ask you how much pain you're in, and then give you like a 1 to 10 scale, and there's like little cartoons to show your face on how unhappy you are. I understand that. I can imagine someone does not understand this 1 to 10 scale. Like, it's not that hard to imagine someone who hasn't encountered this kind of like cartoony 1 to 10 scale, and if they're in pain, is not in maybe the state to like figure this shit out. And then how do they communicate the pain if like even the 1 to 10 scale isn't working for them? Oh. This analysis situates emotional injustice within the broader bioethics discourse on healthcare inequity, epistemic injustice, and medical paternalism. It expands these discussions by showing that emotional norms function as an overlooked mechanism of medical control, shaping how patients express distress, advocate for care, and are perceived by clinicians. While scholars have highlighted how testimonial injustice results in patients' credibility being systematically undermined, I argue that the problem goes beyond mere credibility deficits. Emotional injustice operates by controlling how patients are permitted to feel and express distress, thereby compromising their emotional autonomy, their ability to experience and express fitting emotions in ways that reflect one's circumstances, values, and lived reality. As a result, patients may suffer effective harms such as being denied recognition of their emotions and experiences, as well as concrete medical harms including misdiagnoses, inadequate pain management, and substandard treatment. Yeah, God forbid you're like neurospicy. Like, don't be neurodivergent and explain things differently. That's going to be another problem. Banana says also animals the most drastic case of pain and injustice. I wish our cats can tell us when they're in pain. Yeah, it's hard to be a vet because the animals can't tell you what's wrong. You have to kind of figure it out, and that's not a fun situation where you're guessing what's wrong with something. It's just like experience, but like you can't ask them, oh, does it hurt here and not there? Like, yeah, that's real tough. Real tough. To demonstrate some of the ways in which emotional injustice is perpetuated in healthcare for the chronic pain sufferers, I proceed as follows. I wonder if this author is a chronic pain sufferer. Because like people write what they know in some sense, and like they realized that they may have had an experience where they were in pain and tried to describe it to someone, and the person didn't get it. Meow, but where? Yeah. Section 2 introduces key features of chronic pain. Section 3 examines the dual nature of emotions as psychological and social phenomena, emphasizing their role in the experience and communication of chronic pain. Section 4 defines the concept of emotional injustice and identifies 3 kinds of emotion policing: emotional stereotyping, display suppression, and hegemonizing. Interesting, never seen that word before. Maybe it's a neologism. Each of which reinforces disparities in the treatment of chronic pain. Section 5 addresses potential objections, including distinctions between pain and emotion, overlaps with epistemic injustice, and critiques of framing men as both beneficiaries and victims of hegemonic norms, clarifying the scope and significance of emotional injustice. I conclude by reflecting on how recognizing and addressing emotional injustice can foster more equitable and compassionate healthcare practices. Yeah, so it looks like the suspicions from before are exactly where we're going in this paper. So we'll see. Chronic pain, some features. Yeah, and again, if this author isn't in chronic pain, they probably are dealing with people who are in chronic pain, because it's just a like, if you read about pain, that's one thing. It seems odd though that someone would write a paper on like the theory of chronic pain without actually experiencing it. Chronic pain is defined as pain lasting longer than 3 months, often persisting beyond the typical healing process. It affects over 20% of adults globally, making it a significant public health issue. Chronic pain encompasses a range of conditions, including musculoskeletal disorders such as arthritis and fibromyalgia, neuropathic pain such as migraines and diabetic neuropathy, and idiopathic conditions like chronic fatigue syndrome and irritable bowel syndrome. Yeah, and if you are alive, like nowadays, and talk to people, 20% of adults globally, you're gonna be dealing with people who are in pain. Like, it's just a thing. It also includes pain related to specific conditions such as endometriosis and cancer. These conditions significantly impair physical, emotional, and social well-being, affecting daily activities, relationships, and productivity. Hey, what's up, Cost? As someone who suffers with chronic unending pain, I can honestly say I miss heroin. Yeah, I mean, that's all morphine is just heroin and stuff. Pain sucks. Chronic pain is terrible. I don't have chronic pain at the moment, or like I've got minor pains, but I've been sick before. I've been badly sick, so I have some idea. Steve John says, I think a huge amount of problems for patients could be solved if nurses weren't so overworked. They just don't have the energy for compassion all the time. Oh yeah, absolutely. If we had more money for healthcare in the U.S., things would be very different. Like if the doctors were treated better, the nurses were treated better, we had like time to spend with patients and like discuss with them. Yeah, a lot of this would be the problems of just like if more people were able to like, spend time and like, research what's going on and understand patients' problems, it would be, a lot of the stuff would be less bad. The concept of philosophy of irritable bowel syndrome, exactly, banana. Yeah, ankylosing spondylitis, I don't know what that is. The materials between my joints is being eaten away by its immune system and bones are fusing together. That sucks. Yeah, it sucks. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so the cartilage is gone. That's really painful. That sucks. Cost. But like, yeah, this is the thing. You're going to be in pain. It's like, and how do you fix that? Because of all the shit that's going to go wrong, it's like you need some way to get by. Okay. Chronic pain is not only a physical experience, but also an emotional and psychological one, deeply intertwined with feelings of frustration, isolation, and even helplessness. Pain can be understood as having two interconnected aspects. One is the immediate sensory experience that signals something is wrong in the body, and the other is a negative evaluation of that experience characterized by pain's negative hedonic character, which typically motivates protective or avoidance behaviors. In this way, while pain is not generally classified as an emotion, both share the crucial feature of having both an evaluative and motivational component, as explained in more detail in the next section. In the case of chronic pain, the sensory experience may persist without ongoing bodily harm, and the evaluative and motivational components can become maladaptive, exacerbating emotional distress and disrupting normal functioning. Yeah. So, again, if it's with you all the time, it becomes definitely part of your psychology and your emotional character. Chronic pain has a strong, well-documented link to mental health, particularly depression, anxiety, anger, and suicidal ideation and suicide. Psychological distress is a highly significant predictor of pain levels and patterns, and the relationship between pain and mental health is bidirectional. Emotional distress exacerbates pain, while pain worsens psychological distress. Chronic pain's negative hedonic character and its connection with anxiety and depression creates and perpetuates a cycle of physical and emotional suffering. Yeah. Well, yeah, we're reading on, what's up with energy? We're reading something on, what is this? How people describe their pain and how that is not always understood in the medical community. So I was like, how do we deal with pain and reports in some sense with respect to emotions? While chronic pain and its emotional toll highlight the interaction between physical and psychological experiences, understanding this dynamic also requires examining the social function of emotions. Emotions not only shape individual responses to pain, but also play a vital role in how pain is communicated, perceived, and addressed within social and healthcare contexts. And this is the interesting stuff, because this is where you've got this theory about pain, but then how does that theory translate into is interpreted in different social contexts? So it's not just sociology of like people discussing stuff, but you've got different theories of like what's going on in your pain and in your body. And so now we've got theory interacting with social stuff. Energy says, quality is something I'd like to do more research on. However, I don't know how much philosophical literature there is on it. There is a ton of literature on qualia. There will be a whole thing on qualia on Phil Papers. Let's just like search qualia. Qualia. Like, qualia. There's a whole thing. Like, there's whole sections on qualia here. Like, if you want to learn qualia, there are a ton, my friend. A ton. This seems to be dealing with quality of pain. Not really quality of pain. It's dealing with how people describe pain. That's not the qualia. It's the description, maybe the description of the qualia, but this is not the qualia of pain. This is how the pain is described in terms of like different people's theories and socializations towards it and other like aspects. So we're not worried about the quality of pain. We just are accepting that people are in pain. See, the social functions of emotion. We're talking about how this is integrated into people's lives, not the actual like experience of the pain. Okay, emotions are central to our social lives, shaping how we connect, communicate, and coexist with others across private and public spheres. Through emotional responses, we engage with the cultural, social, and political dimensions of collective existence. Our social lives are inherently emotional. To see this, let us consider what emotions are and the various functions they serve. I take emotions to be felt evaluations that track matters of import for an organism in relation to its environment. Emotions identify the objects at which they are directed as having certain value properties, inform the organism about how it is faring in relation to it, motivate the organization to respond appropriately, communicate to others the subject's emotional state, and produce emotional and behavioral responses in others. And you can see right here, this is the important one. Your emotions will produce responsive emotions in other people. Well, that's really not a good highlight color at the moment. Let's go back to the other one. Yeah, so the fact that you have an emotional response will get other people to emotionally respond to you. And this is the issue. It's not, it doesn't really matter what's underlying, but this is what exists in the social sphere. And that's the interesting stuff here. In the case of chronic pain, emotions such as frustration, sadness, or anger identify the pain as a persistent and significant problem that disrupts well-being. These emotions inform the sufferer about the ongoing toll the pain takes on their physical and emotional health, signaling the need for coping strategies or external intervention. For instance, frustration may arise when pain limits daily activities, highlighting the value of lost abilities or independence. Emotions associated with chronic pain also prepare the sufferer to respond appropriately. Anger may motivate advocacy for better treatment or insistence on being taken seriously by healthcare providers. Conversely, sadness may encourage reflection or signal the need for support from others. These emotions communicate the individual's state to others, often through verbal expressions, body language, or facial expressions. Visible frustration or tears can inform others, whether loved ones or healthcare professionals, about the level of suffering. Yeah, you see right here, all of a sudden, we're getting quantitative. There are levels of suffering going on here. So, like, this is what's going to be at stake. Finally, these emotions can produce emotional and behavioral responses in others. A patient's emotional distress might motivate an empathetic healthcare provider to reevaluate the treatment approach. Similarly, a loved one might feel concern and offer comfort or assistance. This framework illustrates that emotions associated with chronic pain not only serve to evaluate and respond to the experience, but also play a critical communicative role in social and healthcare contexts, influencing how others perceive and engage with the sufferer's condition. The social function of emotions are regulated by feeling rules, social norms governing emotional experiences and expressions. Social norms regulate not only emotions, but also beliefs and behaviors, shaping everything from expectations around intimate relationships, such as monogamy, to everyday etiquette like holding doors or maintaining personal space in public. Feeling rules specify not just what emotion is fitting, but how it should be experienced, acted on, and displayed. Spilling coffee calls for embarrassment and a simple apology, not guilt or over-the-top remorse. While these norms are vital for coordinating social life, they can also impose unfair disadvantage, resulting in unjust treatment of emotional agents. Yeah, so here we go. We're getting into this telling people how they're supposed to act and feel sort of area. Emotional injustice and emotion policing. Social norms regulating emotions can cause harm, injustice, and oppression. While harm refers to injury or disadvantage inflicted on individuals or groups, injustice involves unfair treatment that violates principles of equity, and oppression reflects systemic patterns of domination entrenched in institutions and culture. Emotional injustice, as defined by Pismenny et al. 2024, Pismenny is this author, so this is their own theory, occurs when emotions themselves are treated unjustly or used to treat people unjustly. Ra, what's up? When I cried at my pain consultation after years, I was told it was in my head and should eat more fiber. Yeah, this is exactly the problem. It's like, not everyone has the same reactions, and like people just won't believe what's going on, and it's not good at all. Yeah, it's like this is the problem. People have different expectations of what counts as pain, and when you don't fulfill those expectations, people won't believe you. I've always had this trouble. My reactions tend to be different from other people's. Just I'm a weirdo. Not like crazy stuff, but like my reactions, like I said, like my reactions to pain are not the same as other people. And so it's like I've had to counteract like things like this, not on these pain things over the years, but like I at least kind of get it. Not really well, but like I've not had this level of doctors haven't ignored me that much when I say stuff, but I've definitely been disbelieved at certain times with regard to pain. And it's like, I look at them, I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, I'm not making anything up. It's like, what's wrong with, I'm like, I look at the doctor, I'm like, what's wrong with you? It's like, okay. But like, yeah. Yeah, I remember one time, I had a problem and the doctor was like, and they were going to give me some Percocets or something for it. And I was like, they were like, no. And the doctor goes to me like, no, don't go be selling these. And I had not a thought in my head that like, oh, I was asking for like heavy drugs that I would go sell. I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, oh, yeah, I guess I could sell these. And I was like so confused. And I was just like, what's wrong with you? Like, why would I ask for the pills? I don't need to sell them. It's like, yeah. But it's like, oh man, happens. Banana says also the phobias against drugs, drug users, they're so reluctant to prescribing paid meds anyway. Yeah, so like that was exactly what happened to me years ago. Now this was before the recent opiate epidemic in the United States, so it was less like they were less careful, I guess, then. But they were like, it's still like the guy told me like, now don't you go be selling these. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what's wrong with you? It's like, yeah, and like Ra's like, yeah, tell Ra to go eat more fiber. Like, are you fucking insane? Like, what the fuck's wrong with you people? Anyway, what's about him? Yeah, hello. Well, now that you mention it, it's like, yeah. What's actually funny was that by the time I got the pills, the pain had actually subsided, and then they sat there for like, I didn't even use them, and then I was not in pain. I ended up just taking the opiates for shits and giggles later on. But that was years ago. Okay. Author says, here I focus on the first kind, describing what occurs when individuals or groups are denied the experience, expression, or recognition of their emotions, resulting in an arbitrary disadvantage that undermines their emotional autonomy and impairs their ability to advocate for themselves. I zoom in on emotional policing, a form of emotional injustice, which occurs when the nature of emotion is distorted or their expression is suppressed. It is typically systemic because it is applied to individuals based on their group membership, aiming to enforce emotional norms that uphold unjust social structures and perpetuate oppressions and harm. Yeah, so again, women in the United States tend to be disbelieved, and minorities tend to be disbelieved. And so they expect you to act like white men, and frankly, that's not like the majority of people here in the US anymore. Okay, emotional injustice operates across various aspects of emotional functioning, from elicitation to uptake. To illustrate emotion policing in healthcare contexts, I examined 3 interconnected forms: emotion stereotyping, display suppression, and hegemonizing, with a primary focus on gender and racial biases in the treatment of chronic pain. Yeah, I figured, because this is like the big issue. Because healthcare systems reflect broader social biases, inequalities in the recognition and validation of emotions are pervasive, often compounding along lines of gender, race, class, and age. Yeah. And yeah, again, class shouldn't be ignored here either. Yeah. Because God forbid you be poor, they treat you very different from when you're wealthy. And like also old people and young people are treated differently, but like that's all fair. Emotional stereotyping. Stereotypes are generally held beliefs, implicit or explicit, or generalizations about a social group having a set of particular traits. These beliefs are both descriptive and evaluative. For instance, gendered stereotypes are beliefs that men are ambitious, rational, and competitive, while women are nurturing, empathetic, and collaborative. Not only do these generalizations aim to capture men and women's characteristics, but they also dictate the kinds of traits men and women should possess. Stereotypes and social norms work in tandem. Quote, while stereotypes inform our assumptions about someone based on their gender, social norms govern the expected and accepted behavior of women and men, often perpetuating gendered stereotypes. This way, norms and stereotypes reinforce the standards not only of behavior but of feeling for men and women. I mean, yeah, it's like the old men are told to suck it up. Yeah. Stereotypes need not be negative. For example, black people are good at sports, women are nurturing, but because they are generalizations, they tend to have a negative effect on those to whom they are applied. They become particularly problematic when, in conjunction with norms, stereotypes reinforce the marginalization of the groups they target, augmenting their position of disadvantage. Emotion stereotyping works in just this way, since emotion stereotypes specify which people can have which emotions and in what kind of circumstances. When these stereotypes are applied to members of a particular social group, their actual emotions may be distorted or altered. Consider the stereotype, women are emotional. It suggests that women's emotional responses are irrational and therefore not to be taken seriously, which becomes especially troubling when those emotions reflect experiences of wrongful treatment, such as anger at injustice or frustration with systemic barriers. This dynamic is particularly harmful in medical contexts, where stereotypes not only delegitimize women's frustration, but also invalidate their interpretation and of the experiences that give rise to it. Because women are often perceived as prone to overreaction, their expressions of pain, such as crying, frustration, or verbal complaints, are frequently dismissed by medical professionals as exaggerated or irrational. Anka Samulowicz and colleagues found that, quote, women with pain can be perceived as hysterical, emotional, complaining, not wanting to get better, malingerers, and fabricating the pain as if it is all in their head. Other studies showed that women with chronic pain are more often assigned psychological rather than somatic causes for the pain. End quote. As a result, women are less likely to receive appropriate pain management and more often prescribed antidepressants, reinforcing a bias that frames their pain as emotional rather than physical. Yet chronic pain commonly arises from biological processes such as inflammation, nerve dysfunction, or musculoskeletal problems, factors easily obscured by a psychological focus. The dismissal of women's pain creates a cycle where women are less likely to be believed, leading to increased emotional distress, which is then further delegitimized. It reinforces the stereotype of emotionality, which distorts the nature of women's distress and pain, treating their emotional expressions as irrational, inaccurate, or fictitious. This causal misattribution undermines the communicative functions of emotions meant to convey important needs or problems by failing to elicit appropriate recognition and action from healthcare professionals. This breakdown and uptake creates an arbitrary disadvantage for women simply because they are women, depriving them of equitable care and reinforcing systemic inequalities, thus contributing to oppression as well as harming them by failing to alleviate their suffering. It can also result in emotion gaslighting when women no longer trust their own emotions and pain because an authority figure, a healthcare professional, is refusing to believe them. That further undermines the epistemic function of emotion as well as distorting their very nature of emotion and pain. In contrast, men's report of pain and distress are more often treated as credible and legitimate, reflecting a gender disparity in the acknowledgement and value given to emotional expressions. Emotion stereotyping thus acts as a form of emotion policing that sustains gender oppression. The way we can skip the 5 pages of any social philosophy? Well, look. The fact that we can guess what's going to happen in a philosophy paper is not a bad thing. Like, there's a lot of people who don't have a background in this area. People in my chat tend to have more experience talking philosophy. And so, yeah, we were able to guess what was going to happen. But, not everyone's going to, have the experience that we have. So, yeah, we did kind of guess this is where we're going. But, so what? You still have to in terms of writing a paper, you still have to give the background to set up the discussion so that people who are unfamiliar with the topic can get into it. You have to also, you're poking fun of how predictable we are, yeah, but you also have to remember that papers like this are sometimes written in a way that, these are academics. You're expecting like grad students and undergrads to read some of these papers sometimes. So you are building in sort of a pedagogy into the writing. You're trying to make it easy for people learning the subject, what the sort of shape of the discussions are. Yeah, active reading, but there will be surprises. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, one of the conceits of my program, Philosophy Roulette, is that it's not so hard to find to figure out philosophy. It's extremely hard to figure out philosophy, but when we're doing it in a setting like this, it does seem easier than it should be. I know I can make this look easier than it is. It's not so easy. And so, I mean, there's part of the conceit of this entire show is that anyone can just oh yeah, we're going to figure this out. Not so easy to figure out. And I get things wrong all the time. So it's it's not always, it is a little bit of a conceit of me doing this and making it look easier than it is. Okay. Yeah, but sometimes we do figure stuff out early. 4.2. Emotion display suppression. Another kind of emotion policing is emotion display suppression. These are cases in which stereotypes of race and gender interact to cause the suppression of emotional expressions of distress, particularly in the healthcare experiences of many women of color, WOC. Emotion display rules governed by social conventions dictate what emotions are appropriate to express and in what contexts. Emotion display suppression as a form of emotion policing typically targets marginalized groups. It constrains their emotional autonomy by restricting their ability to express legitimate emotions, to advocate for their needs, or to respond effectively to their circumstances. Yeah, and this is getting into more of the social control. You're not allowed to wail. Certain cultures may be much more loud than others. People are wailing. It's and in other cultures, you have to be much more staid and quiet. But yeah, you can see how am I supposed to go and be understood in a place where they're expecting certain emotions to be shown. Okay, to see this, consider again the stereotype of women are emotional. African American women reporting chronic pain are often characterized as drama queens, even by white female nurses. Black women are subjected to this stereotype and experience emotion delegitimizing described in the previous section. There is, however, another stereotype uniquely applicable to African American women, the strong black woman. SBW stereotype. It constructs black women as inherently resilient, self-sacrificing, and emotionally stoic. Rooted in historical narratives of black women's survival under systemic oppression, the SBW stereotype idealizes their ability to endure hardships without showing vulnerability or seeking help. Because this stereotype is also an ideal in black culture, it is internalized by black women themselves as well as others around them, setting up an expectation that black women will be strong and self-reliant in the face of adversity. When it comes to chronic pain, Lakeisha, Cousin, and colleagues found that African American women often felt compelled to suppress their emotional expressions, including distress and vulnerability, to align with cultural expectations of strength. Black women reported feeling obligated to maintain a positive outlook and hide their pain, even when it was severe. This suppression was so ingrained in their daily lives that many rarely admitted to experiencing pain. As one participant noted, pain, quote, wouldn't be anything new for us black people, end quote. This expectation reinforces the silencing of emotional distress. By normalizing the suppression of legitimate emotional expressions, this behavior not only diminishes the visibility of their suffering, but also enables the minimization of their pain by others, including healthcare providers. Yeah, if you think of this statistically, if you've got a large percentage of your portion of your population that just wants to be stoic, that's going to skew the overall demographic of that population to thinking that those people are more stoic, or they don't that they can handle pain well. So it's if you have a social movement that encourages stoicism, which is fine, of course, I mean, there's other problems with stoicism, but like, if there is like, everyone's stoic, then that's how everyone in that group is going to be viewed. Because as I was talking about earlier in the before we were reading, when you all look the same, people will, give you all the same properties, and they'll think you're like all kind of similar, even if you're not, because, well, a lot of them are stoic, then all of them are. So it's like, yeah. So, and that will just skew things just overall for the entire population. Even if there's only a subpopulation that acts a certain way, it's that their properties, like their descriptions, will be transferred to the group. It's just like stereotyping. And like I said, not necessarily a bad thing. Like, it could be a good stereotype or whatever it is, but you have to be careful because not everyone's going to be the same. Okay, a similar pattern emerges among Hispanic American women. Stoicism, aguantar, okay, I don't know how this is in Spanish, is a key pain management strategy emphasizing endurance without complaint. Gendered expectations pressure Hispanic women to prioritize caregiving roles over their own health, often leading them to neglect their own pain. As with African American women, emotion suppression among Hispanic American women is reinforced both culturally and socially, exacerbating undertreatment and invisibility in healthcare settings. Hispanic American women also report feeling that healthcare professionals do not understand their pain and do not believe them when they say they're in pain. This combination of cultural stoicism and medical disbelief compounds emotional and physical suffering, further institutionalizing emotional injustice. Exactly, Chocolate. Differences tend to get lost. And it's not anything nefarious. It's just that, people are pressed for time. And if you're used to dealing with certain people in a population, and then someone else comes in that, seems similar, you're going to treat them in the same way. It's just, you can't treat everyone. We don't have time and money at the moment to treat everyone like individually. You treat, people as like, as they come in. And that's fine. It's just we don't have infinite time and money for all the peoples. Yeah, abstraction. Yeah. So, and it's normal stuff. It's like, maybe in the future, healthcare will be different and we can actually customize things for individual people to their unique histories, but we're not there yet. Similarly, studies have found that indigenous women often suppress pain through stoicism and endurance, resulting in underreporting and undertreatment. Moreover, indigenous women often experience discrimination and stereotyping, such as being labeled drug-seeking and a broader lack of culturally competent care. In fact, indigenous women are the racial group most often perceived as exaggerating distress, highlighting another layer of emotional display policing that systematically disadvantages them in clinical encounters. In each case, cultural expectations compel women of color to self-police their emotional expressions in order to avoid being perceived as weak, overreactive, or incapable. This self-regulation constitutes a form of emotional injustice. The norm of stoicism creates an arbitrary disadvantage by preventing women of color from expressing emotions that are legitimate and appropriate to their circumstances. By framing emotional vulnerability as weakness, this expectation institutionalizes the suppression of distress, resulting in emotional masking, delayed diagnosis, and inadequate treatment. I mean, I'm reading all this. We were discussing this earlier, but I was also thinking of like the whole stoic movement that we have nowadays. Basically is getting more and more people to act stoic, and the people who does that actually benefit? This benefits the, big moneyed and big tech, who then no longer have to deal with people who are in pain. Because everyone is like taking it upon themselves to mitigate their own pain with like their stoicism. So it's just like this is benefiting like, the HMOs of the world, the healthcare organizations, because you're individualizing the responsibility of pain when it may be a larger healthcare or societal issue. So it's not just exactly the Stoic Bros. But again, who's pushing the Stoic Bros to be Stoic Bros? It's big tech and probably big healthcare. I wouldn't even be surprised. Like, who's getting paid for more stoicism out there? Well, you see right here, these people, like they're saying, okay, the healthcare industry doesn't have to deal with them anymore. Well, that means the healthcare industry is making more money because they're not spending money on treatment of the people that need treatment. So, I wouldn't even be surprised if there was like healthcare buy-in to the Stoic movement, like the healthcare industry buy-in to the Stoic movement. I mean, I don't know. I'm just thinking that this might be a thing because, you know, if they're already getting away with undertreating women of color and like minorities, why not get everyone like that? You know? Then they can get away with treating everyone shitty and they spend no money on healthcare and they can keep all the money for themselves. Okay. What is more, the stereotype that women are emotional and cultural norms valorizing Stoic endurance place women of color in a double bind. They are expected to suppress their emotions to conform to ideals of strength, yet when they do express pain or frustration, they are dismissed or stigmatized as overly emotional. These intersecting pressures make it nearly impossible for women of color's emotion to be taken seriously or understood on their own terms, thus perpetuating oppression of women of color. Bananas says, plus the fear of others, we need less self-care and more community care. Yeah, this is part of the issue, is that what we do in the United States, I can't speak for the rest of the world, is everything gets individualized because we got a cult of individualism here in the US where everything is like, oh, individual responsibility, individual everything. Like, it's all on you. It's like very libertarian. And that's unlikely to be the like universal solution. I'm sure there's times when it's good, but like it's not going to be the universal thing. So again, like this maybe community-based stuff is going to be better at times, and it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution, and like all like individual everything is not going to be good. But that's one of the features of Stoicism, is that it's on you to solve your problem. It's how you think of the world. It's in your head, and you have to, like, you know, take responsibility about how you feel about things. Yeah, that's pop Stoicism. But like I said, who benefits from pop Stoicism, Chocolate? I mean, not directing it right at you, but like, who's benefiting from the pop Stoicism? Okay. Emotion hegemonizing. I want to find out what this hegemonizing is. Differential treatment of women's and men's distress highlights another form of emotional policing, emotion hegemonizing. It occurs when the emotional norms of a dominant group are imposed as universal standards, marginalizing or invalidating alternative emotional expression. Okay, that's fine. We were talking about this earlier. It's like, yeah, if you're a white guy, they understand how your emotions are expressed, and then they expect other people to act like white guys. Unlike emotion stereotyping, which assigns group-specific emotional traits, or suppression, which restricts display, hegemonizing is also sometimes homogenizing when it seeks emotional uniformity, privileging the dominant group's emotional expression as legitimate while invalidating others. In healthcare, this often takes the form of andronormativity, the assumption that male-coded emotional traits, stoicism, emotional restraint, are the default or ideal. This normative framework treats men's emotional expression as the universal standard of affective legitimacy and credibility. Yeah, I mean, we're thankfully, I think, starting to move away from this in society. It'll take a long time. But like, if you look at the men in charge of the US right now, they are like the least stoic or emotionally restrained people. They're completely off the wall. And it's like, I can't see how this is lasting. But like, it'll take a long time to change. Andronormativity reflects the standard of hegemonic masculinity, which posits traits such as strength, autonomy, and emotional suppression as superior to other masculinities and femininities. Yeah, so this autonomy bullshit. Like, whatever that actually amounts to. Within this framework, chronic pain is viewed as a threat to masculinity, leading men to deny or minimize their pain and avoid seeking medical help. Acknowledging vulnerability conflicts with the traditional masculine ideals, creating societal pressure for men to downplay their suffering and conform to norms of endurance and control. Failing to adhere to these expectations often results in being perceived as less masculine, further reinforcing the stigma around seeking care. The emotional stereotype, "boys don't cry," encapsulates this expectation, perpetuating the notion that men should suppress vulnerability and avoid addressing their pain. In this way, emotional hegemonizing regulates men's expression of pain to align with this masculine standard. Women are judged against these male-centric norms, and their emotional expression, such as distress and discomfort, are often dismissed as irrational or overreactive. Although both men and women are evaluated according to these male-centric norms, they are not expected to conform to them in the same way. Instead, women are caught in a double bind because masculinity and femininity are defined as opposites. As a result, women's emotional expression will be interpreted as psychological and inappropriate whenever they express them strongly, or as not very serious when they express them mildly in a manly manner. Either way, women's pain reports will not be adequately addressed. Yeah, I guess this is a question of what counts as the standard. I mean, as people were saying in chat, and as I've also experienced, there is no like one standard of expressing pain, and it's hard to, communicate exactly what's going on. So yeah, it's a mess. Okay, but this is the issue. Like, again, this is why it's a philosophy paper. How do you actually communicate pain when you can't show somebody your pain? It's not like I have like a pain, like a beetle in a box. I can be like, oh, here, you can't look at it, but I have it. Or like I could show you or something. It's like, yeah, doesn't work. While emotion hegemonizing typically involves the imposition of emotional norms by a dominant group onto a subordinate group, its principles are also applied within hierarchies of dominance, such as the internal regulation of masculinity under the hegemonic standard. In this case, the dominant group imposes norms on its own members to uphold its dominance and sustain its ideals. Thus, even within the dominant group, emotion hegemonizing functions to maintain the social order by silencing expressions of emotions like distress or pain that conflict with its ideals. Yeah, I mean, it's like the old be a man sort of bullshit. Yeah. Emotion hegemonizing not only reinforces gendered stereotypes, but also sustains an arbitrary disadvantage for those who fall outside the dominant emotional norms. Women's emotional expressions are distorted since they do not align with male-centric expectations, depriving them of equitable access to empathy, validation, and medical treatment. This systemic silencing of emotions exemplifies emotional injustice, as it denies women the opportunity to communicate their needs effectively and exacerbates existing inequalities. For men, hegemonic masculinity imposes restrictive emotional norms that pressure them to suppress vulnerability and pain, marginalizing those who deviate from these ideals and creating barriers to seeking support or care. Thus, men too experience emotional injustice and harm under the rigid gender emotion norms. I mean, I'm trying to think, do I count myself as like falling under this? Like, sometimes I do. I mean, like I said, I tend to be like, I don't mean to be super stoic, but like I don't tend to react to pain the same way as other people, because I kind of even keeled. So I guess I'm overdoing it on the like stoic reaction myself, and that's not doing anyone any favors, least of all me. Like I said, when I asked for those, I was in pain due to like some medical condition. When I asked for those like Percocets or whatever, I was in a good amount of pain, and what I was doing was I actually started working out to mask the pain with other pain. So I was working out to like exhaust myself, and like my muscles were in pain, like you'd get the burn, and I was like, yeah, well, if like the muscles are in pain, then it just kind of cancels out the other pain because it kind of overwhelms the system. And I was like, I kept doing that, and I was like, wow, this is really stupid. Like, there should be a better way to deal with that. So I was like, probably should have spoke to the doctor first before just going to work out to see if I could counter the pain with more pain. Like, was that really the smart thing to do, me? Probably not. Anyway, continuing. Emotional stereotyping, display suppression, and hegemonizing to illustrate how emotional norms are weaponized in healthcare to delegitimize, silence, or distort patients' affective experiences. Together, these mechanisms of emotion policing sustain systemic inequities, undermine emotional autonomy, and contribute to the broader pattern of emotional injustice faced by chronic pain sufferers. The trend of being nonchalant, cool ties to this somehow? Yeah. Again, but that'll be another social norm that's affecting, pain expression, because you're nonchalant about stuff. Well, that is going to misrepresent the level of pain you're in. Nonchalant people rise up, exactly. Okay, 5. Objections and replies. The previous section outlined how emotion policing operates through stereotyping, suppression, and hegemonizing. But so I don't like this word hegemonizing, but I know why they used it. I mean, it's just sort of like norm, for enforcing norm, like consistency. Like, again, that doesn't make it. Maybe that's hegemonizing is better, but it's like enforcing norms, like social norms. Okay. But some may wonder, do we really need the concept of emotional injustice to make sense of these harms? After all, scholars have already pointed out the dangers of misreading or dismissing patients' pain. What does this new concept add? And what follows, I consider 3 objections that press this question and use them to clarify what emotional injustice helps us see that other frameworks might miss. The first objection is that my examination of chronic pain through the lens of emotional injustice is misleading because pain and emotions are distinct kinds of mental state. Are distinct kinds of mental states. While pain and emotions, as we have seen, both have algedonic, I don't know what algedonic is, and motivational dimensions, they are nonetheless different. For instance, it may be argued that pain inherently motivates actions related to bodily disturbances, whereas emotions have a broader motivational scope and are more connected to evaluative representations of situations or objects other than bodily damage. As a result, I should have been talking about affective rather than emotional injustice, since pain is an affective phenomenon and not an emotion. In response, note first that what matters here is not whether pain is an emotion, but how pain, emotion, and suffering are interconnected. To understand the experience of chronic pain suffering, we must recognize that emotions are an essential part of the picture, so the distinction between pain and emotion does not undermine my approach. Second, emotion norms and stereotypes such as women are emotional or boys don't cry play a crucial role in shaping how people's pain is perceived, expressed, and responded to. These norms often delegitimize suffering, particularly for marginalized groups, by distorting or constraining the emotional resources needed to make sense of and communicate that suffering. Yeah, I mean, this is the issue, is that how different people are going to express their pain is going to be perceived very differently. It's just, that's going to be a fact. Because, like, you know, if you're speaking Spanish to someone who doesn't understand Spanish and you say you're in pain, they don't get it. It's like, that's it. It's like, you have to like wail at that point to get them to understand. It's like, it's very obvious and like you can break it down, but like the emotional response is part of how you communicate. It's like, that's a fair point from this author. Now the question is that super deep? Well, we can evaluate that later, but again, that's what they're arguing here. Okay, author continues. This is why emotional injustice, rather than a broader affective category, is the appropriate framework. It captures the ways unjust emotion norms create arbitrary disadvantages, particularly by undermining emotional autonomy, the capacity to express, interpret, and respond to one's suffering in meaningful and productive ways. Another objection might be that my core arguments are better captured by the concept of epistemic injustice. For instance, emotion stereotypes like women are emotional can undermine the credibility of women's pain reports, exemplifying Miranda Fricker's notion of testimonial silencing. Similarly, norms like boys don't cry or the suppression of emotion in clinical settings encourage self-censorship, reflecting Christy Dotson's concept of testimonial smothering, where individuals limit their own testimony to what their audience is deemed capable of receiving. While epistemic injustice highlights the problematic treatment of someone as a knower, often resulting in credibility deficits, failures of uptake, or forms of smothering, I argue that emotional injustice, as seen in cases of chronic pain, captures a broader set of wrongs that extend beyond this epistemic framework. Emotional injustice undermines emotional autonomy, the capacity to experience and express one's fitting emotions freely and on one's own terms without coercion, distortion, or imposed conformity. All right, so here's the question. Does what the authors say here really go beyond the epistemic? Like, is this actually like a more of a question of agency than of knowledge? And I mean, I hard to say. I'm not like an expert in this area by no means. It's like I'm just sort of hand waving. Thank you, Adam. But like, is it a question of agency or of what we know about like how to express ourselves? And that's like the author here is falling down on, well, yeah, it's more of an agency side thing, that the emotions actually are tied into how we, you know, actually do stuff in the world. They're part of our agency. And I think that's fair. But then again, the other stuff is more narrowly defined, but also hits really hard. Like when you get epistemic injustice, like that's like you can like really hone in on that, and it's very specific. Now this is a little bit more wide, but then again, it's harder to pin down. So that's it. There's a trade-off here. Okay. Emotions do more than convey information. They help us evaluate our circumstances, motivate action, and communicate with others. Frustration and chronic pain identifies the persistence and significance of a problem. Anger can drive a person to demand better treatment or recognition. Sadness can express a need for comfort or connection. When these emotional experiences are policed, framed as overreactions, irrational, or pathological, their core functions are undermined. This impairs individuals' ability to make sense of their experiences, advocate for themselves, and reach out for support. Yeah. So, I mean, one thing that's interesting, though, here is like frustration and chronic pain identifies the persistence and significance of a problem. So they're talking about chronic pain a lot, but their overall story is wider. It's just the emotional response to anything, basically, that can be ignored. So, like, there is a little bit of a disconnect. They didn't 100% make the case in chronic pain, but they did kind of at the beginning. But it's just a good example here. So I wonder, but like, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. It's just, the token example. Okay. In the context of chronic pain, such emotional policing is especially harmful. Patients whose frustration is dismissed, whose sadness is medicalized as depression, or whose anger is read as instability are denied the opportunity to recognize and act on the significance of their pain. Yeah, see, this is the agency stuff. Acting on the significance of their pain. These forms of suppression not only erode emotional autonomy, but also reinforce broader patterns of systemic inequity. Thus, while epistemic injustice highlights important dimensions of silencing and credibility, emotional injustice provides a fuller account of how emotional lives are shaped, constrained, and sometimes deformed by unjust social norms. It captures harms not only to our statuses as knowers, but to our capacity to live emotionally meaningful and agentic lives. Yeah, and see, this is the bit right here. It says emotionally meaningful, but really what they need to say is the emotionally meaningful is part of the agentic life. So like this is defined as part of your agency is that you have emotions and they are meaningful. Like that's fine. I think this is correct. By undermining the evaluative, motivational, and communicative functions of emotion policing denies individuals the ability to navigate their circumstances effectively, advocate for their needs, and connect with others. In doing so, it not only erodes emotional autonomy, but also exacerbates emotional injustice, reinforcing systemic inequities and perpetuating harms. The last objection I consider is about the connection between injustice and oppression as it relates to emotion hegemonizing and men. Men are not an oppressed class in our society, rather they belong to a class that generally benefits from the patriarchal order. When norms of stoicism and emotional restraint are enforced for men, they do not undermine men's position, but instead serve to reinforce their dominance in the social hierarchy. Stoicism aligns with the ideals of control, rationality, and authority, which are highly valued in patriarchal systems, thereby perpetuating the association of power and privilege with masculinity. This raises a challenge to the author's argument. If these norms serve to consolidate men's social advantage, can their enforcement truly be considered an injustice? One might argue that the harm caused by emotion hegemonizing in this context does not rise to the level of injustice, but instead functions as a mechanism of maintaining privilege. In response, first, the injustice lies in the arbitrary disadvantage imposed on individuals, men included, who do not conform to these norms. Such individuals may face stigma, marginalization, or exclusion from the social and emotional benefits of vulnerability, connection, and self-expression. Second, hegemonic masculinity prevents men from adequately experiencing and expressing their vulnerability because they are men. In that regard, then, they are emotionally disadvantaged as a class. Thus, men are oppressed by this norm via their group membership, even though they benefit most from the current social order. Alright. As a dude, this kind of I feel like this is a missed opportunity on the part of the author. They're clearly coming at this from the minority perspective, but nowadays there's a whole like loneliness of men sort of thing. There's problems with the alt-right like sweeping up large groups of like young unhappy men. Because you know what? Most people are not going to fall under the hegemonic like norms. And that is definitely a problem, that we have these norms and a lot of people don't conform to them, and they're not getting what they were told they were, because no one's getting what they expect in this life. And like this hegemonic masculinity, most people aren't doing it. And this is part of the issue, is that there are these ideals out there and you're not being able to conform to them, and people feel inadequate because of this. And so we've got this whole problem with dissatisfied male youth at the moment. And I feel like there's definitely an opportunity here for the emotional lives of men and the problems that are discussed in this paper to be, applied to this problem with like the dissatisfied male youth. And I feel like this is just like, we've got one paragraph where this might get touched, but like it's just, just as one paragraph. So it's like just like this one little bit. They are emotionally disadvantaged as a class. And like, this is it. Like, we have a way of actually analyzing some of the problems that we have with men and their emotions in our society at the moment, and it's just, this is all we got. It's like, this is the end of the paper. Anywho, as we have seen, hegemonic masculinity defines itself in opposition to femininity, a dynamic particularly evident in the emotion stereotypes I've discussed. Quote, women are emotional and boys do not cry. Yeah, see, again, I feel like this is like a little bit like, if we actually had a bit better of an analysis of like the male problems we have in society, then like this stuff, it comes off as a little overly simplistic. Not that it's wrong, it's just one-sided from the sort of like masculinity in opposition to femininity issue here. Like, I don't know if like this needs to be developed better. Okay. Latvian Jesus, what's up? The first act of violence that patriarchy demands of males is not violence towards women. Instead, patriarchy demands all males that they engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation, that they kill the emotional part of themselves. If an individual is not successful in emotionally crippling himself, he can count on patriarchal men to enact rituals of power that will assault his self-esteem. Bell hooks. Yeah, that's right. Back to Lurk. Yeah, so bell hooks knows what they're talking about. And that's the issue here, is that this is a more complicated thing is going on right here than what this author is talking about. That doesn't make the rest of the paper like wrong at all, but something else is going on here and it needs a bit more analysis. This is just not, hegemonic masculinity is not defined just in opposition to femininity. I think that's, it's like, it's a little too simplistic there. But again, that doesn't take anything away from the rest of the paper. It's just, it looks like we've got some missed opportunities. It would be a very different paper though, but like, again, more could be said right here. Like, they've got this nice framework for talking about emotions and like what's wrong with current society, and it just feels like we've got a bunch of a little bit of weak theorizing in this one spot. So it's like, that's why I'm pointing it out. Nothing else is like I don't think there was anything like super wrong with that what was said. It's just like, is masculinity just defined in opposition to femininity? I don't think that's not the full story there. Anywho, these stereotypes frame emotionality as a feminine trait contrasted with rationality associated with keeping emotions in check, which is coded as masculine. Hegemonic masculinity and hegemonic gender standards more broadly disadvantage men, women, and people of other genders, illustrating that current gender system is harmful and oppressive to everyone, albeit in different ways. Banana says they're also saying for 10 pages and barely talk about chronic pain. Yeah, that's what I mentioned earlier. It seemed like it was a token example towards the beginning, and it didn't really get too there wasn't anything specific to the chronic pain. So yeah, it's part of the issues. All right, let's finish this up. We only got like 2 more small paragraphs. In this paper, I've demonstrated how emotion policing in healthcare, particularly in relation to chronic pain, constitutes a significant form of emotional injustice. By exploring mechanisms such as emotion stereotyping, display suppression, and hegemonizing, I have shown how entrenched social norms and biases distort, dismiss, and suppress the emotional and experiences of chronic pain sufferers, particularly those from marginalized groups. These practices not only undermine emotional autonomy, but also perpetuate systemic inequities, exacerbating harm and oppression. Recognizing and addressing emotional injustice is crucial for fostering a more equitable healthcare system. This requires challenging the harmful norms that govern emotional expression, ensuring that diverse emotional experiences are validated, and rethinking how healthcare providers engage with patients' emotional and physical needs. Beyond healthcare, this analysis can inform broader efforts to combat structural inequalities and promote justice in other domains. By centering emotional autonomy and dismantling oppressive norms, we can take meaningful steps towards building a society that values and supports all individuals' emotional and physical well-being. Okay, and that is it. Yep, all right. So, as always, now that we finished up the paper, tell me what you think about it. And the way we do that here is using the emote review. The emote review is a kind of a rubric where you get to throw emotes in chat that describe how you felt about the paper. If this paper was fun and made your brain dance, gave you some fun ideas, you give it a brain dance. Spelling and capitalization do count here. If it talked about existential or artistic drama, you give it a scream, so a Nog scream. Ouroboros for deeper and ancient ideas, Nog Oro. Nog knife for slicing and dicing arguments, if it was like kind of a technical paper. Nog navel, navel gazing only for academics. Nog turd for all style, no substance, just still poop underneath. And Nog grapes for big claims that shrivel up. You can also use the global vote yay and vote nay from Twitch, and also my vote meh. Note that everything in the green will make, I calculate an overall score, make the overall score go up. Everything in the red will make the score go down, and the vote meh will make everything go towards the middle. We get a Nog sigh from Ra. Why, did you thought this was a bit of a meh, or did it not live up to your expectations, Ra? I mean, I think that's fair. Like, this paper kind of was like, it had something going to it, but it was fine. Yeah, it's a little bit, it seemed like a little bit weak on, it seemed a little weak. Like, we called out what we thought was going to happen in the beginning. It fell out that way, and that's not really a problem. But like what would have been more interesting was, like I was saying with the epistemic injustice stuff, Miranda Fricker came up with some, maybe not her, but she had examples from other people, or she came up with some like hard-hitting examples of like things that were like injustices that came up here. There weren't really like these hard-hitting emotional injustice things. And that's what I was just talking about with like the section on guys. There could have been like a few examples where you could say, hey, look, this really applies to specific examples for men. And they could have brought back the talk of chronic pain and given some very specific examples of like chronic pain and people who did not get the proper treatment, and like how that outcome like became a worse outcome. Why did that vote yay not go through? Oh, the chocolate, if you can fix that, the V's have to be capital in that, but if not, I'll fix it later. Yeah, so I guess that's how people are doing it. A little grapes, to be honest. Yeah, exactly, Ra. It seemed like you were going to get some like cool theory, but not a whole, it didn't feel like a whole lot happened. Yeah, so again, we're getting people like very sort of on the fence about this paper. So yeah, meh and grapes. No, I'm with you. I think the idea of this emotional injustice is good. They need to sharpen it up a little bit. That's all. That's kind of how I feel about it. It's not quite incisive as it could have been. There could have been some more incisive, like insightful and telling examples. But like, it's not bad. Like, I don't like, it's not a bad paper, but like, yeah, I'm feeling this sort of with you guys here. Banana says emotional injustice is also already a thing. She didn't develop much on it. Yeah. Unreal says I jumped around both sides of the fence in my response. Yeah. It's like, I mean, it's not like I think it was like a bunch of like good ideas. I just, like I said, I feel like it could have been sharpened up a little, but like that's all it is. So it's like, yeah, I feel you. It's like you feel like this sort of existential pull of like, yeah, we do need emotions for agency. That's not a bad claim. So I'm gonna give it a Nog Scream. But again, like it's the Nog grapes also are gonna. I'm with Adam and Durpin about like the grapes also, and it's like, yeah, it just feels like, wasn't terrible, but like it just wasn't like great either. Yeah, it's not an ultra sure. No, 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 by no means. Like this is a decent paper. Like it's like vote meh, and I'm gonna do like one of these deals where everything's gonna be kind of split. So like I feel like if you want to read a paper in this area, this is a fine paper. Like it wasn't badly written. It was well written. I didn't like stumble over the words or nothing. Everything seemed like perfectly clear. There weren't things like, well, like what do they mean by that? No, this was fine in terms of the writing. Just like I was looking for, I feel like everyone also agrees, looking for just maybe a little bit more development along one or two lines could have really benefited the paper. But like otherwise it was pretty good.